Hey, my name's Kendall. I'm a chef here in Charlottesville, Virginia. And today we're actually going to take advantage of some of the great produce we get here in Virginia. We're going to use this kale that comes from Farmer John's garden out in Virginia Beach to make this dressing that I've had the chance to learn from reading cookbooks and working in a bunch of different restaurants. And I've gotten the chance to make something I feel like is kind of my own that hopefully I can share with you guys as well. So what we have once again is going to be that kale, a little bit of Farmer John's chive grass as well, some olive oil, garlic, some whole black peppercorns. If you don't have black peppercorns, it's okay to season this with some fresh black pepper at the end. We're probably going to add a little bit of that in as well. Brown rice vinegar, some spicy brown mustard, some sourdough bread cut up, day old, 2 days old. If you don't have sourdough and you have other crunchy white bread, that's fine to use. I don't recommend sandwich bread. It probably won't work out for you here in the end. Some room temperature butter, some almonds that have already been shelled, and some Parmesan cheese. So let's get started. We're gonna start off by adding the 1/4 cup of olive oil we had measured over here with 2 cloves of garlic and a pinch of black peppercorn, just into this little saute pan here. And the goal is to confit that garlic in this oil so we soften the garlic and cook it while also seasoning that oil that we're gonna add into our dressing later. All right, so we're gonna take this mixture here and we're gonna put it over about medium to medium-low heat. The goal when confiting this is not to fry it. So we want the temperature low enough that we can see little bubbles coming out around the garlic so that we know it's cooking and some of that water's cooking out. But if we start to see any color, we should take it off the heat and we should turn off the pan. And this step will take about 30 minutes or so. Now for the kale, what we have over here is a pot of boiling water that's been seasoned with salt. You want the water itself to taste kind of like the sea, maybe not quite as salty as the sea, but somewhere getting close to there. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the kale and we're gonna take the leaves off of the rib of the kale and we're gonna blanch in this water for 30 seconds to a minute. To clean the kale and get it ready to be blanched, we're gonna take the leaf portion away from the stem. And there's a few ways you can do that. The easiest way is probably just to take the leaves and pull them away from the stem. And that's kind of a fun thing to get to do because you can get the whole family involved on this portion. If you want to have a family dinner and you want everybody to feel like they contributed, this is definitely a safe thing for kids and for other family members to get to do that aren't maybe super experienced in cooking. If you feel confident with a knife, the way that we might do this in a restaurant is we'll set the leaves so that they're all on one side of the stem. So we'll fold them over. And then I'll take my knife and I will just run it along the stem there so I can cut the stem away and be left with the leaf portion. So the great thing about eating kale during the spring like right now is that it's really when it's at its peak, when it's in season. It's definitely the right way to eat, in my opinion. Now once we've gotten all the kale separated away from the stems, we're just gonna take this kale here and give it a rough chop so that it cooks down a little bit easier down the road. So what that means is just take your knife and run it through that pile of kale, watching out for your fingers of course, so that your pieces of kale are about like this big. So 1 inch, 2 inch is fine. Even something like that, like as big as my pinky finger, is probably just fine. Don't have to be too fussy about the size of it at this point. Add it carefully to this pot of salted water. Get it all in there. I'm gonna make sure it's all getting the chance to be cooked, so I'm just taking a little colander with a handle to move that kale around in the water for a moment. We'll let that cook for about 30 seconds or so. Blanching this kale here in salted water, we're seasoning it a little bit, breaking up some of those kale fibers, some of the stemmy bits that make their ways through the leaves, and we're also making it a little more nutritional here by making it easier for your body to digest those nutrients. So now our kale's been blanching for about 45 seconds or so. I'm gonna turn off the heat of the pot that it's in, and I'm gonna go ahead and take my little handled colander that I was using earlier and get some of that kale out and put it back in this pot over here. We're gonna strain most of the water out at this point. It's okay if a little bit of water makes its way into the pot, but we don't want it to be swimming in water here. All right, we got our kale out. We're gonna take our kale here and we're gonna set it down in the fridge for 20 minutes or so, just to help it cool off a little bit. So I took a big ladle of that water from blanching the kale, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna take that sourdough that I mentioned earlier, that I cut up into little cubes. We're gonna let it soak in this water here. And we'll let it soak long enough to get soft, but not so long that it turns mushy in any way, shape, or form. So that'll probably take about the same amount of time that our oil ends up taking. Now we've gotten that oil started where the garlic is confing in that olive oil with those peppercorns, we're gonna take our almonds and we're actually gonna add them to the oil as well. So they soften up and they toast lightly so they season the dressing later. So here are the almonds, just adding them to that confing oil. Around gently in the oil. And we're just gonna let those steep and cook gently with the garlic and the peppercorns. And now that the kale is chilled in the fridge, we're gonna add it to the bowl of a food processor alongside the sourdough bread here that's been soaking in that kale blanching water, the spicy brown mustard, our brown rice vinegar, our room temperature butter. We're gonna grate some of the Parmesan cheese in there as well. And we're going to thinly slice some of the chives from earlier and add those in too. The almonds, once they've cooled down enough that we can handle them safely in the oil, we're gonna take them out of the oil and add them as well. We're also adding the confit garlic from the oil to the kale puree. A little bit of brown mustard. Some of that room temperature butter. It's important when slicing the chive grass, we do want to slice it kind of thin because it hasn't really been cooked yet. It'd be hard if it goes in whole or in thick pieces for it to break up and really make its way into the sauce nicely. You get to add the almonds now that they've been toasted in that oil. Yep. Gonna grate some of that Parmesan cheese from earlier. We're gonna add that next to the kale sauce. Now this part's really to taste, so if you like a ton of Parmesan cheese, use a bunch. If you're not a huge fan of it, you could probably skip it altogether. But I like the saltiness and the richness that it adds to the sauce. We're gonna strain the olive oil that's been seasoned with the garlic. And the reason we're doing that is we don't want the whole peppercorns to go into the sauce. If you didn't use the whole peppercorns earlier, you can skip this step and just add the oil. At this point, we've added all the oil, and now we're gonna add some of that water back so we can make it nice and saucy. It's probably like 2 tablespoons of water at a time. And we're really just looking to blend it until we have the texture we want. So at this point, we've taken the sauce out of the food processor and we're gonna taste it to see if we're happy with the flavor of it. Notice the texture. It's nice and thick like a pesto, but it still is able to run off the spoon, which is what I think is probably what we want it to be. It's really good. Splash more of that rice vinegar just to brighten it up again. And stir that, give that another taste. And the trick to like really nailing down something where you're really happy with the way it tastes is seasoning incrementally. So add a pinch of salt and pepper at a time until you have that final flavor that you're really looking for. No reason to sprint at this point to dumping in just a bunch of salt, a bunch of pepper, and then making it to a point where you can't take that back. think I nailed it with that. It's delicious. So I'm really happy I got to share this recipe with you. It's something I always keep in my back pocket when I need a really great recipe on the fly to make for somebody special. It's definitely the sauce I like to use first. So I hope you enjoy making it for yourself, for your family, for whoever. Yeah, happy Earth Day. Enjoy your veggies, eat your veggies.